Hi everyone and welcome back to SwitchUp and to the episode where we go back over the best games that we reviewed last month, tell you a little bit about them and maybe fill in a few blanks in your watching time.
That's right, so we reviewed 7 games last month. Well, we reviewed 10 actually, but 3 scored so badly they're not going to make this list. But we'll go through the games that did do well, going from obviously the 7th scored game up until the highest.
Need for Drive has left the chat.
So which game did get the highest score for the month of July? Well, let's find out.
Alright, so we have The Legend of the Heroes Trails into Reverie. Now this was an interesting one for me because I really wanted to review it, but I hadn't played all of the old games.
Right.
And there were a good three titles really that you had to have played to fully understand the story. Now what it did include, which I was quite pleased about, was a massive backstory. Essentially it was like a big book that you could read. And you could actually read some of the novels and things. It was all in there.
Oh wow.
And I spent one evening, maybe it took me like 2 or 3 hours to go and try and read everything that had happened.
Jeez, okay.
And I don't know, when you play an RPG, you kind of take for granted all the twists and turns. It's like, this person's died.
Yeah.
But then they've come back from the dead. And when you read it, it doesn't quite translate the same. It's a bit weird.
It's like reading a Marvel comic.
Yeah, it really is. So the actual game, it took the franchise into a slightly different direction in terms of the visual.
Yep.
So I don't know if you've played the Trails from Zero and Azure.
I've played a bit of Zero, which is like an isometric view, isn't it?
Yes, exactly right. And I actually preferred that. I have to say, I do prefer that. Because this just looks like a bit of a generic,
Right.
you know, it looks like your generic PS3 JRPG.
Right, yeah.
Which is not a negative, I prefer the other style. Now the gameplay, it was a bit of a swan song for these characters, so it does a lot of fan service.
Okay.
I mean a lot of fan service. And again, if you haven't played all of the older games, that's just not going to hit the same.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
It had some nice mechanics in there, I did enjoy it, and overall it scored a SwitchUp score of 82%.
Okay, well in 6th place for the month then we had Atelier Remake. Now this was reviewed for us by Asdin over at Grin Wolf Games, and he did really enjoy this one. He hadn't played it originally. I don't think this game actually left Japan when it came out for I think it was the PlayStation 1, obviously way back when. He said that they'd done a good job of making it very accessible, more so than the original from what he'd read at least, and that he really did enjoy, you know, the tweaks they'd made, the quality of life improvements that they'd made, although he did feel that the game lacked any real challenge.
Yeah, it was quite short as well. I seem to remember him saying he finished it, but then it was designed for him to play through again. I'm not sure how that would go down with me, but there's just a sea of these in terms of competition, even from the Atelier series that are better.
Yeah, exactly right. This one though got a SwitchUp score of 84%.
Okay, so it turns out we actually have 9 games this month, a little more than we thought we had, because we had a couple of late reviews that actually did really well. Another that joins 6th place is the new Double Dragon release. Now we played through this one together almost in its entirety. I say almost because we died horribly on the last boss, which was very upsetting, but it has roguelite elements that actually heightened the experience rather than detracted from it. You could choose which stage you went to, but at the end of each round, you had skill points that you could purchase for your individual characters. Now your characters worked as a pair, you could tag in and out, so you each essentially have 2 players that you can choose from, and you can tag 3 times. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. Now what was cool was you had special moves, but these didn't cost your health. They simply had a bar which gradually charged up, and if you could kill enough enemies with your special move, you could spawn things like meals to improve your health, and it gave it a real sense of risk and reward, but also a flow. We really enjoyed our time with it. It did have a couple of flaws, but the roguelite side actually ended up being one of the biggest positives. That scored a SwitchUp score of 84%.
Next up, we've got Lisa the Definitive Edition, which included Lisa the Painful and Lisa the Painless.
Joyful, but
the joy, that's the one.
Close enough, yeah.
That's the one. These, I didn't really know what to expect. I knew that they were inspired by the likes of Earthbound and things like that, and it was very unusual. I did like the premise, and I think what sets a lot of these games and why they get this cult status is because the stories are always so unique, or at least they try to be. This one, you start out in his early childhood of the main protagonist, and it's a horrible life. Like, it's really grim and dark, and then it flashes forward to a post-apocalypse.
Right.
And he finds this small girl in the apocalypse, and it's made evident quite quickly that in this world there are no women.
Okay.
So he picks her up and he's like, right, I'm going to protect her. I'm going to look after her. But then his three mates are like, oh, well, we could give her away. We could sell her.
Yeah.
And it gets very Mad Max. I'm happy to tell you this part, but it is a minor spoiler. So if you don't want to hear it, skip. But essentially she goes missing and the whole game is you trying to get her back.
I see.
I compared it to, it feels like The Last of Us in that, you know, the relationship between you and the young girl, and there's like a bit of a scene where you see her gradually getting older before she goes missing. But then it's like The Last of Us combined with The Binding of Isaac.
Yeah.
Because it's so grim.
Yeah, very morose, isn't it, from what I've seen? Yeah.
I don't know if this has a physical, but if it does, you should get it, because this is like right up there.
It reminds, literally just from what you've said, there was a comic book series years ago that I used to collect called Why the Last Man, which was the complete opposite in that all the men had died out.
Right.
And it just, as you were talking, it kind of reminded me of that premise, and then obviously the world goes to pot as people start fighting and factions appear and what have you.
Yeah, it's so grim. Like, it is everything that would happen. Like, there's this building with all these blokes like bashing on the door, and you find out it's like a, what should we say, a place where men would go to try and find satisfaction.
Right.
But then there's no women, so there's just all kinds of wrong going on inside there. Yeah, really strange, but very, very compelling. It has a turn-based combat system, which is straight out of, well, a lot of its inspirations. But I did like the fact that you actually have to press buttons to do attacks and things like that.
Yeah,
and
extra damage and defense and what have you, yeah.
Exactly right. Really good game. I enjoyed it a lot, and I do think if you're a fan at all, or you're intrigued at all, you should check it out. It got a SwitchUp score of 85%.
Lovely. Well, that was joint fourth for the month, and the game that it shares that title with is Raincode. I can't remember the complete title. It's got a bit more to it than that. Detective Archive, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's the one. Raincode, Detective Archive, etc., etc.
That's it.
So this is from the same team that created Danganronpa, which I hadn't played before, and Glenn, you're currently playing at the moment.
I am, that's right.
But you don't need to have played them at all to enjoy this. It's a really interesting world where you play as one of these master detectives, or a new fledgling master detective. And it starts out on a train and gives you a case straight away. It's very much, I should imagine they were inspired by like Murder on the Orient Express.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know, it has that kind of feel to it to begin with. But then it cranks up to 9 and you enter this large city and you start to get some really gritty murders and other cases to solve.
Wow, right.
I enjoyed it. I didn't find that I had that thing that I find in a lot of these RPGs and JRPGs where there's a character that just winds me up. You know,
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do,
Like slapstick character.
Sure.
They have a mild version of that, but it's not to the same degree. The main protagonist is actually likable, says some things that you're like, yeah, that makes sense, rather than ludicrous things, you know?
Yeah.
And you have a number of different skills that you can use to help you solve these crimes. Yeah, it gets more off the wall the further you go on. It takes clear inspiration from Persona. There's almost like the labyrinths that you go into to solve the crimes.
Okay, yeah.
I just think it's a really good game, and I would never have played it had it not been for the channel.
It sounds a little bit like, you mentioned Danganronpa, but it sounds a bit like AI, the Somnium Files.
Yeah, another one I haven't played. I need to play that.
Yeah, it's just from what you've said about the murders and the scenes and what you have to do, the investigations. Another good game, by the way. But yeah, this one got a SwitchUp score, as I said, same as last time, 85%.
And in one of the joint fourth place places, we have the new Disney's Illusion Island. Again, we played through this almost in its entirety in co-op play, and you can play with 1 to 4 players. It described itself as a Metroidvania that was a bit more accessible, which did worry us, honestly, before it came out. Now, what it turns out to be is more of a spiritual successor to some of the earlier Disney Illusion games, but it has that open Metroidvania map. There are different abilities that you unlock, like swinging on rainbows, and the gameplay has a real flow to it. It's all about that platforming. You might be finding a number of keys to get into a next area. You might unlock a new skill and then tackle a boss using that ability. But yeah, it's got just a flow that we found quite difficult to articulate, but made it feel, in a weird way, a bit like a speedrunner or a parkour game. You fall into a synergy and a synchronicity with the person you're playing with, and it was just quite cathartic. Artistically, it looked stunning, and there were a few criticisms, things like being a bit formulaic in certain areas, like the aforementioned keys, and the storyline, it's not the best ever, it's okay. But the actual gameplay, yeah, really solid, and we enjoyed it, and it got a SwitchUp score of 85%.
My last review then of the month was Doomsday Hunters, which is a roguelite which is funny. We haven't actually got any other roguelites.
It's the only one, I think. Yeah, I think you're
in
right.
this list, which is quite a pleasant change, really, isn't it? This one I had no hopes for at all. I did the classic thing that you should never do, which is to look at the artwork and go, oh yeah, that looks nice. I'll give that a go. And it was really nice, really impressive. The team were working on this for 9 years. They put a ton of time and effort into it. In terms of roguelites, it has a lot of the things that you would expect. It has a system whereby you're clearing each of the rooms, you're moving on. Each room rewards you in some way. There's a risk and reward mechanic in that you can actually send rewards back and get yourself a currency that you can spend later, or you can open them up and, you know, get the guns or whatever.
Sure.
But you never know what it's going to contain. I do love it when games have DPS, so like damage per second indicators, so you can quickly go, oh, that one's got more damage per second. It's much faster, but if I hit the enemy once with this one, they're dead.
It's game over, yeah.
Exactly. Don't know what that voice was. Don't know what happened there.
That reminds me of the old days of us playing Monster Hunter and checking out the damage per second on weapons and, you know, dual blades against whatever, switch axe or, you know, hammer.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and I think that's probably why I like that system so much.
Yeah.
I understand that. It makes sense to me, you know, rather than a weapon that gives you all the info, but you're like, well, what does it actually mean when I'm using it?
Exactly right, yeah.
What I also love is that you have an inventory, so you can carry up to 5 weapons. So you don't have to just choose one at the expense of another.
Oh, nice.
You can carry them all around with you. When you scrap them, you get currency.
Oh, that's
great game. Check out the review of this one. It got a score of 88%.
Lovely. Well, we had a tie for first place this month, actually. So the first of those two games was Might and Magic Clash of Heroes, and this was the definitive edition. Now, this is a game that came out back in 2009 on the DS. It's a long-running series, but this was a spin-off of that series that took it in a more puzzle-based way with a lot of turn-based strategy in there too.
So on the DS, I would imagine it used both of the screens?
It did indeed. You had your units at the bottom and obviously the enemies were at the top, and you used the stylus to control it.
Right.
And it was pretty much a match made in heaven. Yeah. It works perfectly well. On the Switch, obviously everyone's on the same screen. It can be a bit cluttered at times, which is unfortunate, but I think if you'd never played it, you wouldn't even give it a second thought. You know what I mean? But in terms of the gameplay, this is one of the most addictive games I'd ever played, and it holds up very well to this day, which I'm very happy to say.
I'm happy as well, because that's going to go in the next addictive games list, I'm sure.
Absolutely right. Well worth picking up this one. So you're putting your units together either to form attacking stances or defensive. There are other units that you can use that deal more damage but take longer to come into effect. It's all about picking the best units and trying to obviously defeat the opponent as you go along. It's got a campaign that will last you a good 20 odd hours, and it has online multiplayer as well this time.
And local multiplayer.
And it did have local, you're right.
And I
lost. Played a bit. To be fair, you didn't really know what you were doing. I have to give you that. But this got a score of 89%.
Fantastic. The last game then, and I'm new to the series. I played Pikmin 1 and 2, the HD remakes that just came out, and incidentally, there's something about them in this game that I'm sure Glen's going to talk about, but it is Pikmin 4.
Absolutely. Now, I'll be honest, in my head, not that you ever give a game a score before you've reviewed it, but I expected this to be outright number one. It wasn't, because of a few things that held it back, but that's not to say that it's not a good game, because it's absolutely fantastic. So it carries on the classic gameplay of the Pikmin series, whereby you obviously pluck the Pikmin creatures from the ground, and they will assist you in picking up items that you need to try and get home. Is generally the way that these work. You're a space person and astronaut, probably should have said. But in this new game, they've added a lot of features. I mean, this has been in the works for a good 10 years now, this game, and it's nice to see that it isn't just a copy-paste job. They have added a lot. They've taken a couple of bits out, though, or at least changed them in a way that doesn't improve things, which is just a bit strange. I don't want that to overpower all the good, because there are many more forward steps than backwards. But Pikmin 3 Deluxe had a full campaign co-op mode where you could play as a character each, split screen, and you could go about the day and you could coordinate yourselves and you'd meet up later, you know. Really good co-op experience. That's not in this one. They've gone for a strange assist system where player 2 just throws items for you and stuff. And they've also changed the motion controls to from full gyro to a system where you hold down A to access motion controls, which they have used, as you alluded to, in the new 1 and 2 ports, which for me doesn't work as well.
No, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, because it didn't even work too well there, and the way it was accessed in the menus, it was just clunky.
Yeah, so obviously they had that system in mind, for 4, and then used it in 1 and 2, so we saw it in 1 and 2 first, but it's just a strange change from a system that works very well in the previous game. That being said, though, as I said, I don't want to make this sound negative, because it isn't. Just as a long time fan, you notice those little bits. So much has been added that's good. It's a wonderful game. It's beautiful, charming adventure, highly recommended, and of course it got a SwitchUp score of 89%.
So that's it, those are the highest rated games on the channel. I'm sure there's a few missed and some others that will roll over into next month, but let us know which were your favourites.
Absolutely, did you pick any of these games up and what score would you have given them? It's always interesting to read another perspective. And were there any games that we didn't review? Obviously only games that we review can be in this list. If so, let us know in the comment section.
If you want to save 5% on your eShop credit, then head over to switchup.gg. You'll get 5% back in coins and it supports us a tiny little bit.
It certainly does, and thank you to anyone that does do that, by the way. There's also a link down there to Play Asia. If you're looking to import any games, use the link, use the code stated, and you'll get yourself 5% off of your order. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.